Okay, so today I want to do a little talk about 3D prints and what I use to get them smooth, and it'd be for a 3D printed pattern, something you could use in a foundry. So without any further discussion, let's get into this. Okay, so since I never did like the finish of 3D printed parts a lot, this is one of those that I 3D printed. Didn't do much scraping on it, mostly was paint and sanding down where I could. A little bit of sanding. Not really happy with the finish on this part. Either side it worked, but it's not what I like. So going back to my old pattern making days, if you want to call it that, what we did for aluminum parts and everything else is we used scrapers. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about for 3D printing, let's see, yeah, so everybody who's 3D printed anything knows that you got layers in here like this. You got, let's see, every layer has a little bulge like this, extremely exaggerated of course. This is your table that you're mounted to, your print bed. And at the bottom of the print bed for your first layer, you always got this little elephant foot. You can take care of that by putting a fillet in here, but for 3D printed pattern, that creates another problem we'll get into later. Also, as your shells go around, when they get to a sharp corner, they're going to have this little bulge in here and continue on, because that's where the machine pauses. So what I did, going back to my old pattern days, is scraping parts. So when I first started out, I did a lot of shell core molds. They're cast aluminum molds for making shell cores for casting. So these are a couple, first two homemade tools I made. Just triangular files you find that I had that were dull. Now they're just a flat file I use. That's for knocking off lumps. If there's anything on the casting, I could pound on the back. Not a big deal. I found another dull file. Made this part as well. Scraping fillets with these two, scraping flat surface with those. An old planer blade I cut in half. We had a 24-inch planer. When they get to this thin, you can't sharpen them anymore. So they're basically scrap. And then one of the Boyne outlet that I don't think they have anymore, Boyne surplus I mean. This was an old file like so. I resharpened the edges so I could use it as a scraper, and that helps me get down into corners as well. So those were my homemade tools. Then I needed more, so I ran into this one at Boyne Surplus. That's a carbide tip on the front, steel in the back, and I was able to purchase a series of these. I think it was through Freeman's catalog. So I got this for scraping radiuses. Since we made a lot of shell cores, permanent molds, so this all works on iron too, but permanent molds, vacuform tooling that was aluminum at the time, and we made some molds for lost foam casting, where you make the mold out of aluminum. They inject the foam, it expands out and it goes from there. So these are what I had in the pattern shop, and I got to thinking, it's like, why am I bother sanding and painting all this stuff? So I didn't film it, but I needed an angle block. So what I did is I made the pattern, 3D printed it, and then made this so I can scrape it. Or not made it so I could scrape it anyway. You basically take a scraper in here and you scrape like so. It takes off thin layers of material. It works faster than sanding. It's smoother finish. I don't need to paint anything because these surfaces ended up being smooth enough. I should be able to pull them out of the sand with no problem. I may have to do another video where I show you the process of scraping it, but it's pretty straightforward. The triangular files work the best, like this one. And that's, I guess, about it. I mean, I like scraping a lot better. Dimensionally, it doesn't really change anything because you're scraping off so little material. It's not really going to matter much, but this is the way I do it. This is the way I'm going to continue to do it. And with the tools I got, it's not going to be a problem. All the tools, except for these over here, these can be made at home if you got a forge, which, let's face it, everybody who's casting metal basically has a forge. You can take the temper out of the files, grind the file to shape, bend it the way you want it, and everything else, and then reharden it. And like I said, these all work on iron too, so they're pretty stout tools. So that's it. I hope this helps out some of the people that want to try it, and we'll talk at y'all later. Thanks. Bye.